Welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're going to be discussing The Stand, Episode 3, titled Blank Page. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so that you'll be notified of all the content we have on the channel. A lot of new stuff coming. We're going to be doing 30 coins this week. We'll be doing WandaVision later in the month. Big Sky returns. There's a lot of content coming to the channel, so please hit that sub button, hit the bell, leave a comment, hit the upvote. That really helps the channel. And yeah, this episode we focused on sort of four characters, mostly three, but I'll include the fourth: Nick, Tom, Nadine, and Glenn. And they go for it. They go ahead and just give us the info as far as who Nadine is. Nadine Cross. They tell us, yeah, she's bad. like they, we go ahead, we go for it. We get a little flashback when she's a child or she's young, and a great little sort of like, it's not a Ouija board, but it's basically a Ouija board. And it spells out, Nadine will be my queen. And we know that that was Randall Flagg communicating with her, and that she's sort of been his agent since before their pandemic, before Captain Trips. And she has been sent to Colorado on a mission. And we even get the reveal of what the mission is at the end, not the details, which they gave a little hint at. Those of us who have seen the original series or read the book obviously know where this is going, but we're not going to go into spoilers. We're not going to spoil that stuff. But based on what the show tells us, Nadine is a villain, and we need to worry about her. How do you guys feel about the way her story played out throughout the episode, including the opening scene, her relationship with Joe, and clearly she needs to meet up with Mr. Harold, which is what Randall Flagg basically tells her at the end.
I don't know. It's funny because with all the off-screen stuff with Amber Heard, it's kind of hard to feel sorry for her. But
I didn't even want to go into that.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying,
yeah.
Kind of some of the stuff that's happened. It's one of those things where you're just like, man. But
it's like you would ally with Randall Flagg.
Well, in the context of this, it's when they showed the whole. It's called what, pancetta? They call it pancetta. Isn't that like a cheese or some kind of meat? the Ouija board thing. When they started doing that, you started to feel bad for her because it wasn't her idea. She didn't choose any of that. So when that happened to her from a very young age, she was impressed upon her this importance. She's going to be this person for this person who she didn't know. And then, the apocalypse happens somewhat later in her life. Like all these things, it almost feels like prophetic to her. It feels, like this godly person is trying to.
And it is, really.
Well, yeah. But it's, to me, Harold is a psychopath, whereas Nadine is a product of some very shitty circumstance that has happened to her that has made her the way she is. So that was my take on her.
So you're saying Harold is a product of himself. He is who he is, where she was manipulated and engineered basically to be where she's at this point.
Right. Yeah. Harold's a psychopath and has some, underlying mental issues, whereas Nadine was manipulated.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the pacing of it and how it played out and everything. How it played out, yeah, that's good. That makes fine. And honestly, I feel like, and I hate to make this gripe for, I think, every episode of the show, but I feel like it would have been a really, but I guess in a way I'm kind of arguing against chronological order in this one too, but for and against, because I would have loved to see, not knowing who she was, would have loved to see her meet up with Larry. And, you see their journey, and then maybe you get hints that something's a little off with Nadine. But, by the time you make it to Colorado, you get this flashback, and what's up with Nadine. It would have been a neat surprise, I think, for people who didn't know what the show was. But it seems like they crafted this show exclusively for people who have seen the previous show or read the book. Like the show is crafted for you to have previous knowledge, because, that would have been a really neat dramatic twist, that she's been manipulated, that she's been set up to fit this role before the virus was even set loose.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see her encounter Larry on the road with Joe and then get to know them through their travels. It would, I think it would have been a better setup.
This episode did, one of my concerns in the last couple of weeks was the fact that they completely skipped over the journey. But to be fair, this episode they actually went back, and I see, okay, they're really chopping it up, because now we got to see Stu meeting Harold and Franny, we got to see Larry meeting Nadine and Joe. So they are still, in other words, characters that have made it to Colorado. We're still going back and filling in some of those gaps. So we are getting that journey sort of, just it's way out of order. And one of our commenters I had asked last week, if you weren't familiar with the source material, how do you feel about it? And I don't recall I didn't write the name down, but you can go back in last week's episode and read the comment. It was very extensive, but basically he said that he was enjoying it, and that he didn't notice, obviously, because he doesn't know what the story is, but he was enjoying the story as it was being told. And so, that was something I was very curious about. If you didn't know about the show, were you still enjoying it? And based on this commenter, he is. And I think this at the end of this episode, something that hit me, and I want to know if you guys agree, this is this show that I think would work beautifully as a binge. When it's all out, if you sat down and watched this show from beginning to end, in one or two binge sessions, that might be the way this show is structured for something like that. Do you agree or disagree, or how do you feel about that?
Well, that was true of the original. I think that it was a good show to just kind of binge, because often I think back in the day, often when we watched it, it would be like sometimes in one sitting, you'd watch the entirety of The Stand.
Yeah, it was on like 7 VHSs or some shit.
Right. Like, or would air on USA or something, back in the day, and you and the family would, make dinner, go about your day, and watch The Stand. So I think it is good for binging.
That's very yeah, make some dinner and sit down and cry for 6 hours.
Well, I bring that up because I think if we're watching this week by week, if I sat down and watched this all in one go, how would I react in terms of I am getting all that stuff? Yes, it's out of order, but in other words, in that one sitting, my mind may sort of shuffle it out. You know what I mean? Like it's not as dramatic as you watch an episode and then we have to wait 7 days to get the next one.
Because you look at like Tarantino, I think the reason that format works with movies is because it's a contained story. It's a couple hours and then you're done. With a TV format, although as the season has progressed so far, I still don't like it, but it's filling in some of those gaps. So my gripe gets less by each week, but it shouldn't take 9 weeks for this to make sense in this kind of format. Setting it up like this does make it difficult, I think, in a week-to-week kind of show.
Well, yeah, I think it would have been great for a binge. I do agree with that. I do, however, still think, like deeply that that just the order they put things in, takes some of the drama out of it. Because, as we mentioned before, it's like, oh, yeah, we know they make it to Colorado. Oh, we know, Stu's going to wind up in charge and everything seems okay here. We're seeing people in their roles before they even get there, before understanding how they got to those roles or how they became the people they did. It removes a buildup, and it kind of kills an emotional impact. Whereas in a Tarantino film, it's a much shorter format, and you're often seeing characters who are very static or at least in their personalities and who they are. And sometimes it's more in a Tarantino film, okay, you started them off doing this crazy thing and it impacts somebody else's story, and we go back and we see, oh, okay, this is why they did that, and it makes sense for the type of stories that he tells. I feel like for something like The Stand, it just makes a little less sense, and I think we're getting robbed of those characters growing. Like, whereas, this episode, we got a flashback to Larry's journey again, and we got to see him on the road, but without the drugs and everything, and seemingly fine without the drugs. And it's like, okay, all right, so they were never an issue. Like, why do we even need the bag of drugs in the story? Like, do we know that he was even a junkie or just a guy who liked drugs?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I agree with you, Larry. I'm playing the other side, and but no, I completely agree, because moving on to the next point, last week we were already introduced to Nick. Nick is a major character. He's the voice of the representative of Mother Abigail, and we already know he's in Colorado. He's fine. Everything's okay. And then we jump back, and this week we get his story. Now we know where he's going to end up. And so I do completely agree. Yeah, it sort of takes some of that drama out, because we know how it's going to end as far as that part of the journey. But what they showed us was interesting. We find out why he wears the eye patch. We find out what kind of person he is. We know he's deaf. We know that he was talked to by Randall Flagg. He was, trying to manipulate him. Mother Abigail speaks with him. We don't know why he was chosen. It's vague. It was vague in the original as well. And he meets a character named Tom. Now, Tom's a major player later. I'll just refer to what happens in this episode. But Tom, he announces himself as developmentally disabled. That's the label he uses. That's the label we'll use. And I thought they did well with the character. I was a little concerned with what they were going to do with that character, because I do remember him from the original, and I didn't know how they were going to approach it. I thought the actor did a fine job. That interaction I thought was done very well. And like I said, that character does play a big role later in the story. How do you feel about Nick's journey? Also, real quick, we see what kind of character Nick is. The guy who blinded him is in the hospital dying. He's the last patient left. And instead of just abandoning him, he comforts him and takes care of him until he dies. So we're getting, who Nick is as a character in these scenes. But what did you think of his journey, what we learned about him, the Randall Flagg stuff, Tom, the introduction of Tom? How'd you guys feel about Nick?
I think that and this goes back to, I think that the drama, like Larry was talking about, it takes some of the drama away. I think that the drama, because this is going to be longer than the original miniseries, is going to take place more at the end with whatever it is that's going to be different in this miniseries than the original. I think they're just building it up differently. Doesn't mean that it's not irritating, but I just think that. But I also, Nick's character, I enjoyed seeing what kind of person he was. It felt like he was on his last leg. He wasn't too happy with his life. And then once everything started to go bad, Mother Abigail kind of coming back into his life gave him hope. I think that it showed him, he seemed to always be a very good person, but he didn't have hope. And I think that she instilled that back inside of him. Tom's character, it took me a second. And as soon as he said the moon part, I was like, oh shit. Then I remembered who it was, because I didn't at first. I was like, who is this guy? And then as soon as he said it, I just started laughing, because it's like M-O-N, and that spells,
one piece of drama, I guess, they haven't shown Tom in Colorado. And so I guess they've left that mystery for those who don't know where that story goes. So I get, there is that.
And, I liked his introduction. And I liked the fact that they showed Randall Flagg how he would adapt to people who weren't as easily manipulated, and showing his anger, showing how frustrated, and showing how powerful he was. So to me, they're doing a slow build of the villain, but I think they're trying to show more and more how powerful and strong he is.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and like you said, Brian, I think, that's another thing that the show is robbed up, because if we never see Tom in Colorado or any characters like him, and we see those characters in a flashback, we go, well, I guess they didn't make it because we didn't see him. Much like the woman that travels with Larry for, on his way out of New York. We're like, okay, well, she didn't show up in the caravan, so, the assumption is, but it was a character that was, you know, well played, that was likable, and you as the audience otherwise would have assumed, you know, okay, yeah, she'll be around for a while. But yeah, I did think that it was well done. I did enjoy the whole watch, you know, just going back through guy with the eye patch. I'm so bad with names.
Nick.
Yeah, going back through Nick's story and being introduced to Tom, you know, I thought it was well, and you did get to see the characters, you know, kind of nature, who he was. But, you know, again, you know, I got to say that buildup of how and you used the right term, I think, Spencer, when you said, you know, Jesus, because, you know, like it would have been neat to see the buildup of, you know, just having this faith-based exodus to Colorado that they have, and, you know, and once they arrive there, just setting on a roll that this deaf, one-eyed man, you know, this man nearly robbed of all his senses, and he's mute, you know, robbed of nearly all his senses, is the voice of God. You know, he becomes that. You know, he loses, you know, everything and becomes the voice of God. And it would have been neat to see that play out in real time. But
I was just thinking too, the telephone game. You know, he's hearing from Mother Abigail, then he's signing, and then Franny's like interpreting. That's like 3 versions of the story down before it gets out to all the people.
Yes, actually. Yeah, you're right. There's a great line. I wrote it in my notes. I forgot to bring it up. With Randall Flagg. And this is why I'm enjoying his portrayal, this actor's portrayal. I forget the actor's name.
Alexander.
Yes. He, when he he goes to Nick and he's, you know, telling him, you know, I'll help you with your eye. I'll help you. You could speak. I'll help you hear. You know, he's telling him he'll help him with everything. He's like, all for the price of I just need you to worship the ground I walk on. That's his exact quote. As long as you worship the ground I walk on, I'll do all these things for you. I cracked up. Like, I was like, damn. But that is Randall Flagg. That is the character. And
I think that, to me, that even shows more so who Nick is, because, all right, you're in an end time scenario where there is no one left around. Why wouldn't you? I mean, you know.
Well, yes, it plays into the whole idea of temptation and, you know, all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I get the aspect. I'm just like, for me as a person, I'd be like, I don't know, man. Everyone else is dead. Who is this going to affect me worshiping this guy who nobody else knows? Like,
well, yeah,
further along the story, we see that, you know, there's more to that. But like, if, you know, he leaves the hospital and the only other person he has is Tom, like, it'd be very hard to say no to that when everyone else you know is dead.
Well, yeah, exactly. And because yeah, he's in a really, really rough position, you know, like rougher than most folks. I mean, if he gets sand in one eye, he's just like completely, you know, he doesn't have really any other ways to sense the outside world other than, you know, touch. And Randall Flagg, and I think Randall Flagg has to give it to him that straight, because, you know, he's such a manipulator. He knows that, unlike a Harold, you know, he can't, you know, dupe him into thinking that he's getting a better deal, you know, because Nick is because he's such a good and straightforward person, you know, that he has to tell him that he has to, like, and he has to make it clear from the beginning that he's got to get him to a place where he's outside of Mother Abigail's reach, you know. So he's like, you have to worship me. You have to turn completely. Like, I can't ease you there. It's like, because, you know, who he is so vital. You know, I'm sure he knows that like, it has to be a full conversion. He wants that conversion before he meets Mother Abigail.
We get more with Stu this week, quite a bit with Stu, including flashbacks where he meets Harold and Franny, laying the seeds, because we know that him and Franny become a thing, and she's pregnant, so we're getting sort of the build up to, you know, Franny giving birth. And then we introduced to a new character, Glenn. Couple interesting scenes. They sort of rushed this, which is, I guess they had to, but to get Glenn into the picture because he is one of the top characters. But basically, they have a nice dinner, and they wrap up Glenn. They introduce Glenn through a dinner. And they're just like, yeah, he's a guy, and this is, he's sort of like live and let live. He's an artist.
Was he in a movie called Live and Let Live? That sounds like something great in your.
But they, they have their little moment, and we discover, we get a little more background on Captain Trips, learning that a lot of animals have died, with the exception of rats and deer. Rats and deer are going strong. They seem to be immune, but most other animals, for the most part, haven't made it. So it wasn't just affecting humans. And we got a little reference to that in the first episode about the guinea pigs, but now we're finding out most dogs, have perished as well, and other animals. And then basically we see these paintings. So Glenn is having sort of these dreams, and he's painting what he sees. And we learn, yes, he's also seen Mother Abigail, but he's also seen Franny, and Franny was pregnant. So he's sort of somewhat of a prophet. He's seeing things in the future. He's painting them down. And yes, lo and behold, he is also part of the Council of Five, which is made up of Stu, Franny, Glenn, Larry, and Nick. And that sort of gets that was my only that gets. I mean, they just jump into that like really quickly. And even though we know that there's extra episodes and we have a little extra time, that was odd that they sort of rushed that. Now maybe we'll get more in next future episodes, flashbacks explaining how that all works and Glenn's journey as well. But yeah, they just jump in. They're like, yeah, this is the crew. They serve Mother Abigail. Nick's the mouth, the voice. I mean, they lay it all out really quick. Even the Council 5 sort of debating how they should govern. We get a little bit of that. So what do you guys think about the pacing of all that and the character of Glenn?
Well, go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I do like the introduction to Glenn and everything. You get a lot about his personality, but I do feel like even if we were going to start at Colorado, we needed or at least them arriving in Colorado very quickly. And if we were going to do a series of flashbacks, I would have loved to have seen a build up to how they work together as a council, instead of here are these pre-established personalities. They've already got a dynamic when you come in there. Nothing really needs to be worked out for the most part. This is how they operate, because that seems to be where we're at right now. And I feel you could have been a little more invested in it if you had that build up to some degree. So maybe we should have started if we were going to start at Colorado, which I'm kind of against still, obviously. But if we were going to, maybe it should have been the early days of Colorado.
Oh, excuse me. I liked his introduction, but it seemed it felt forced a little bit, because we've had some moments with Stu. We've had lead ups with Stu, but introducing us to Greg Kinnear and the way they did felt a little forced. He's a good actor, so I liked it once he was introduced, and I liked the direction they took. I liked all the meetings, the kind of banter going back and forth between the five of them. I enjoyed all that. It just felt like his introduction almost felt like an afterthought, and I know it wasn't, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, a little rush, because everybody else, he didn't get much screen time, and then by the time we get to the end where they're declaring, yeah, these are the guys, this is the crew, it's like, oh, we just met him like 2 seconds ago. We'd already had we've gotten a lot of Stu, and we've gotten a lot of Larry at this point, but Glenn is just sort of quickly thrown in there. But
well, yeah, I think that's a good point, that it does feel like, even though we know it's not, because this is kind of how the story plays out. It does feel like someone just kind of went, oh, we need another character with a different angle. What if we throw in somebody a little more logical there, a little more grounded? Yeah.
That's in the devil's advocate character.
Yeah, that's the way it felt. We get the guy, the messenger. A vehicle pulls up, and Larry and Stu discover a guy who has Las Vegas key tags, and we've been establishing for several episodes, well, the entire series thus far, that seems to be where Randall Flagg is residing. At least that's where he appears to be when he meets you in your dream. And this guy was crucified. It's clear that he had been crucified, and he needs to speak to Mother Abigail. We have really cool sequence in which the council, the crew is there, Mother Abigail is there, and basically Randall Flagg speaks through him. He was being punished because he turned against Randall Flagg, and he's there to send a message. And the message was, "I'm going to blow your house down." How'd you guys feel about that whole sequence, and just the way it played out?
I just feel like they're trying to tell me that Las Vegas is bad.
Yes. Well, and it's so on the nose. This is the way, this goes back to the book, but yeah, Las Vegas, Sin City is literally Sin City. Yes. It's like, all right, Stephen King, come on, man.
Well, that's what happens when you live in a hut in Maine for your entire life and like a little sheltered. But I liked how they kind of gave him an origin spot. They kind of showed, once again, I thought that this episode was showing us more about Randall Flagg and how he's a formidable opponent. And showing, and I don't remember the gentleman's name who was crucified, but as they went through his story, you're just like, okay, he's going to be better. He's going to get healed. He's going to be okay. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he snitched, everything started happening again. And I felt like that was a great way to show how, you basically have this one omnipresent figure and Mother Abigail who's able to communicate through her dreams to people. You have another character who's basically the opposite of that, and Randall Flagg. And I think they did a great job establishing how powerful he was as well.
Yeah, they did a good job of that, and it's ominous. It definitely tells you that things are going down and soon. But it's and it played out well enough. The omen that, hey, war's coming to your doorsteps, whether you like it or not. I'm going to end this. And though, like you said, the portrayal of Vegas is a little on the nose, but I will say, having been there, I did feel like if I remained 2 more weeks, I would have died. Though I was having the time of my life, so it may not be too far off.
Larry was also crucified in Vegas.
He paid for it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, do you think, and not even comparing it to the other series or the book or anything, just from the way they're telling this story, do you think they should have sat on the Nadine revelation a little longer? Or do you think it was appropriate to go ahead and reveal, in other words, the threat that Randall Flagg gives in this episode, we know exactly what he's referencing? Do you think that should have been saved for another episode, or do you like the way it played out in the end, where they revealed in the end that it's her?
Well, this is part of why, like I was saying a little bit earlier, that if they were going to do this time skip to Colorado, it should have maybe been a little earlier than this point. Because it's one of those things, like you said, we know how that's going to play out. Like, okay, is that going to be a thing that plays out in the next 2 episodes? Because if so, where do you go after that? Is what I'm wondering. It's like, where can you go after that?
I don't know. I wasn't. I didn't dislike the way that they brought her into the forefront. Because they still haven't showed how she's going to help him. They've showed that she not only looks up to him, but is playing the queen part. Like, she is in love with Randall Flagg. Yeah. And I am interested to see if this is going to be different than the source material, but how they're going to have.
I don't think it is that particular story. What do you think about? Well, she's told Harold. That's the name she's given. So clearly, she's got to team up with Harold. I'm curious to how long. See, and I don't want to. Yet again, we're not going to spoil it, but we know that there's a big event that occurs soon, and I'm thinking it's going to occur really fucking soon, like a lot sooner than it.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. It's like, if it's going to happen that soon, if we're going to have that twist, happen this soon, then where can we go after that? It's like I could see one, maybe two more episodes, but well, they did say they were looking to extend the ending, so I guess we're getting quite an extensive ending potentially.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I think that some of the main storylines are going to be the same, but I think some of them are going to end a little different and give us a story as to what happens after the original ending. So that's why when we think we have an idea of where things may go, I'm not 100% sure. The Stand is I think it is Stephen King's longest book. It's long as shit, but I think, yeah, God, it's so long. I think it's like pages or something. It's like the size of the DSM-5. But I think that them breaking it up over this many episodes shows that they're going to go not only a lot more in detail, but they are going to try and go past the book. How like the Game of Thrones books are 1,100 pages and they did 10 episodes. So this is less episodes, and they're trying to do more episodes than what's in the 1,400 pages. So who knows? It may end shitty as hell.
Yeah, I'm very curious. This story is one that Stephen King has changed. The current, if you buy The Stand right now, the current book, it's not the exact version that was originally released. He's gone in there and re-edited and added stuff. So this is a story that he's tweaked over time. And now to know that, yeah, he wants to tweak it a little more, a little bit of a George Lucas thing going on here, where he's, this is his epic, and yet he's never quite satisfied, and he's constantly, messing with it a little bit. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but
it really is, and I'm just curious why he's so dissatisfied with one of his most beloved works of all time. It's definitely one of those things that, long after he's gone, he'll be remembered for. And he just doesn't seem to be as satisfied with it as everybody else is.
It is 1,152 pages.
Even to the point of, I don't recall if this was in a book or in a comic, but, we've talked, I believe, in our first review about how, and we're going a little bit off the rails here if you're listening, audience, but in the Dark Tower books, there was it, Larry, you may know, was it a book or a comic in which there was a direct tie-in to The Stand, and I think Roland or someone came into that world, and I can't, there was an event, or there was something where that happened. Because Randall Flagg bounced, he's not just in The Stand, he's in other stories as well.
He's in a lot of Stephen King's works.
But Roland, I want to say, comes to this world. And I'm going to have to do some research and see if I can recall what that story was.
I think it was in the books.
Was it in the book? It might have been in the books. I can't remember.
Well, eventually the comics, went back and covered, much of what was in the books, if I'm recalling correctly. But,
yeah,
so it could have been a little bit of both.
Do you think, I brought it up before a couple episodes ago, do you think they would do that? In other words, a direct Dark Tower tie-in?
That I'm curious about, honestly. And, I think what
should be a better, would you want it?
I'd want it to be loose, if anything, and questionable. Well, I mean, you could question whether or not it was Roland you saw, or, I wouldn't want it to be significant, I think is a better way to phrase it. It shouldn't impact the story in too big a way. It should just be a hint that these worlds are connected, much like in The Mist, the movie The Mist. I believe it was a picture of Roland we had a painting of Roland at the beginning of that. Where one of the characters is painting something, and we're getting a painting of Roland from the Dark Tower, and and that's a neat little hint. And plus the events of The Mist and the creatures that you see are clearly something that would fit into that world and its lore. I'd want it to be, maybe not that insignificant a tie-in, but insignificant enough that where it doesn't divert the story.
Well, I think what you just said is the only way to me it would matter. Anything more than that, you would be either adding another character to do a spinoff, or it would have to. unless you're basically just giving a nod to all of the Stephen King fans, there would be no point in doing it. I think that the little Easter egg, like you said in The Mist, is a perfect way to do it because it's a nod to the fans without confusing people.
What if
or you could have a character who's like you go ahead.
What if it's a backdoor pilot to a Dark Tower series? And I bring that up. There's been rumor, he wanted to do a series, and it never panned out. And I don't know if there's still talks. I have no clue about any of that. But at one time, they wanted the Dark Tower to be a series as opposed to the films, the film that failed miserably. What if they set up sort of a backdoor pilot for a Dark Tower series?
To me, a series would be a much better way to do that content than a movie.
Yeah, and it could fit into, absolutely. It needed a series, at the very least a mini series, so they do need to do that. And as far as fitting one into this show without, altering the story enough, I don't know, I want it to be vague enough that it's like, perhaps even a known liar in their community, swears he ran into a cowboy or something like that, just,
Yeah.
and it's just like, it's like, and they're like, yeah, man, we're in Colorado. You can find a lot of cowboy hats around here. And they're like, he's like, no, like legit cowboy. You have the revolvers and a trench coat. And like, yeah, okay. Like, sure thing, man.
So yeah, that's all my notes. Any other thoughts on this episode of The Stand, episode 3?
I don't have any. I was peeing, so I was muted.
Thanks for meeting.
You're welcome.
Like, yeah, I think we pretty much covered it for this episode. Again, of course.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So yeah, thanks for listening. 30 Coins. We'll be reviewing the first 2 episodes this week. Look out for that. Very excited. New series on HBO and HBO Max. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.